beginning of every episode, Mr. Rogers would put on his loafers and look at the camera and say to us who are watching, "Won't you be my neighbor?" This invitation to be a friend, to be someone who Mr. Rogers cared about. And while that was a long time ago, most of us are familiar with the advertising statement, "Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there." The idea is a neighbor of someone who looks out for the people around them. Neighbors take care of each other. They care about one another. But as I've thought about it, I'm wondering if that's still true today, if people think about their neighbors like that. I mean, I walk down my street and I see different opposing political signs or signs for different causes. I see people kind of ignore each other, not standing and talking and hanging out. And especially in the age of COVID-19, where we're maintaining a social distance, I think it's harder and harder to love your neighbors. So we might see Jesus command this, we are to love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves. And we ask, well, what does that mean? Like, what does it actually mean to love my neighbor? And who is my neighbor? Like, who do I have to love? Or who does Jesus want me to love? Are there boundaries around that? Are there limits to who I am called by God to love? And that is what Jesus tried to address in the passage we're going to look at in Luke chapter 10. The setting in Luke chapter 10 is that a lawyer stands up to question Jesus, to test him, asks him, what must he do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says, if you want to know that you're going to be in the age to come, eternal life, then you keep the commandments. The guy says, great, but then he tries to justify himself and he asks, but who is my neighbor? And I think he's trying to imply that there are people who are not his neighbor. Yes, I know I'm supposed to love my neighbor, but where do I draw the line? Because there are people that I don't have to love, right? And Jesus tells this story in Luke chapter 10, verse 30. Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave him to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you have.' Then Jesus gives the punchline, asks the man, 'Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in among their hands of robbers?' And the expert in the law replied, 'The one who had mercy on him.' Then Jesus says, 'Go and do likewise.'" So Jesus tells this story of a man, probably a Jewish man, who's traveling down this dangerous road from Jerusalem to Jericho. It would be like walking in downtown Chicago in a sketchy neighborhood at night. I mean, it's not a good place to be. And he gets robbed, and then 2 religious people come along, and we're expecting them to help out, to pick up the man, to obey the commandments, and to care for this guy, to love their neighbor as their self. Because this guy would be within the boundaries of other Israelites, other Jews that they would care for. But they don't. They pass by and they head on to Jericho. But then a Samaritan comes along. And if we were living back then, we would see Samaritan and go, ugh, like a Samaritan, like that's not going to be any good. This person would have been a kind of person that Jews despised. They thought they were morally compromised, that they were kind of sketchy people. And yet the Samaritan comes by, sees the man, has pity or compassion. Like the word there communicates that he felt the guy's pain in his guts. He felt him for him, and he takes care of him, brings him to an inn, does basic first aid, but then brings him to an inn and pays for what would be like a 3-week stay. Says he can heal here, and then even if he has to stay longer, I will pay for it. I'll pay for it. And then Jesus asks the guy, hey, which one of those 3 was a neighbor to the man? He says, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. Now, why does Jesus tell this story? Sometimes when we've heard the story, maybe we think, oh, well, this story is about like, if you see someone in need on the side of the road or something, stop and give them some money and help them out or help them fix their car. And that's not a bad thing. But I want you to understand what Jesus is doing. The lawyer is trying to say, I want to think about who I need to help. Like what matters is what kind of a person it is, who do I have to help? And Jesus says, no. Take the perspective of someone in need, of a robber, someone who's destitute, someone who's naked and hurting. Put yourself in that person's shoes And if you're that person, who would you want to be a neighbor to you? And in that case, does it matter the boundaries? Does it matter what difference there are between the person in need and the person helping? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. What matters is not the boundaries between people or the things that divide people. What matters is the need of humans. And we are called to love our neighbors, which brings us to the big idea from this passage, which is that neighborly love has no boundaries. Neighborly love has no boundaries. So when you're thinking about who is my neighbor, who does God want me to love, to care for, it doesn't matter if they're a different age group than you, a different grade than you. It doesn't matter if they are poorer or richer than you. It doesn't matter if they have different political opinions than you. It doesn't matter if they have different religious convictions than you, different beliefs than you. It doesn't matter if they have a different lifestyle than you and they do things that you disagree with and you think are sinful. It doesn't matter. There are no boundaries that make someone off limits. God is saying, Jesus is saying, there are no boundaries to neighborly love. And so I would ask you to just think about, who is that person for you? For me, it was Mark when I was in high school. It's this guy who just didn't really have any friends. He was not in my friend group. He was not popular. He was a part of the youth group, but we just sort of put up with Mark. He was kind of a loner, kind of awkward. And yet I knew that being a follower of Jesus meant treating Mark like a neighbor and including him and loving him and caring for him, even though there were these boundaries between us. I wonder for you, who is someone that you might consider normally that person, they might even be someone who's opposed to you, like a bully or someone who makes fun of you. Remember that neighborly love knows no boundaries because that is how God loved us and sent his son Jesus.